Because we got to get the hours out of you as quick and as soon as possible so that you don't become spoiled in the process of the development. So this becomes very interesting. It would be very interesting, Prophetess Kelly, to find out how many hours a person has to put in school before they get their master's degree. See, Harris got me thinking now. How many hours are needed? Brother Carlin Harrison says, Master Prophet, how hard was Reverend Ike on you? Reverend Ike always said to me, he always said these words to me. A wise son makes a glad father. I can still hear his words in my head. And I think his greatest challenge with me was when he was helping me to write my letters. See all those letters that y'all get? That was the result of me hearing Reverend Ike. And he would go through my letters and says, I told you to make sure you always put this in the letter, always put that in the letter. So those was the most challenging times. It was with the letter writing and getting the certain language in the letter the way that it needed to go. And then after so many years of that, Reverend Ike came to me one day and he brought his staff. He says, I've taught you everything that I know. Now it's time for you to teach me what you know. He says, you have learned everything. He said, there's nothing else that I can teach you. And I was always so humbled by that statement. And I never felt it was true. I didn't. I didn't feel it was true. Because he says, there's nothing else I can teach you. He says, I've taught you everything that I know. He says, now it's time for you to teach me what you know. He says, there's nothing else I can teach you. And when he said that, I never felt that was true. But looking back at it, our life from then on just went about conversation about daily things. There was nothing else he was teaching me because he had already given me all the books in the library that I needed to read. And he had already, I was already reading those books. I was already putting those principles into practice. I was writing the letters. I was making television work the way he said it was needed to work. And that was it. But one of the things that also, which I probably need to write another book on mentoring, when Reverend Ike probably only put, he didn't put together the making of the entire Master Prophet together. Okay, he put together a component for me to help me to master direct mail. There was a lot of different mentors along the way that we also would have to give credit to. For instance, the late Archbishop Bill McKinley. Now, he was a mentor, and then Archbishop Roy Brown also was a mentor. They were from different aspects. Archbishop Bill McKinley taught me how to dress. And he always says, this is the way a preacher should look. And he went and took me to places to shop. And he was the one that forced me to get Louis Vuitton luggage. And I never forget, he says to me, the first thing people handle when you get off the plane, at the time it was Prophet Jordan, is your luggage. And based on how your luggage looked determines how your honorarium will look. So at that point I says, get the Louis. And I never forget, all the money I had for that week, I sunk in Louis Vuitton luggage. But I didn't know that what he was doing, he was preparing me. I was glad I got it, because then he brought me on the road with him and Jackie McCullough. So I was traveling on the road with him and Jackie McCullough. I just did everything he said. When he told me, he said, get this, get this, get that. I said, I can't afford that. He says, get it anyway. And I'll never forget, he says, Bernard, he said, Bernard, you gotta invest in your ministry. I said, I got stuff to do. He says, did you hear me? Invest in your ministry. And he would talk about that. He would talk about the importance of putting whatever money you had back into your ministry. And so he brought that. He taught me how to stand in the pulpit. He taught me, I guess he was my teacher of homiletics.
Yes, he was.
He gave me the aspect of preaching, in that regard, and in delivering the text. But we would have a lot of arguments on the road. I'm gonna really be honest with you, because he brought us on the road to take the prophetic, but he had some challenges with the prophecy, with the prophetic. One minute he was like for prophecy, and prophecy is the word of the Lord. And then the next minute he would say there's no ongoing revelation. And I was like caught in the middle. I says, God, what in the... And we would get into heated... Sometimes I wonder, because because he did so much stuff with debating, sometimes I think Bishop McKinley purposely took the opposite side just to see how you think. And he would do that just as I watched him. He would take people just to see if he can break them down. And I watched him in debates with people. And so we would get into a lot of arguments. Sometimes I think Bishop McKinley, if he had nothing else to do, I think he just says, we'll be on the road. He said, I'm gonna pick a fight with Bishop Jordan today. He would just start saying, I don't believe that's the word of the Lord. He said, he says all the prophets died with the apostles. And I said, Bishop, how can you sit there? He said, there's no ongoing revelation. This is the final book. And I would sit there and say, Bishop McKinley. I says, but what about, and I would be quoting scripture. He says, yes, these are in the canon of scriptures, the first century church. After the first century, there was no more prophecy. And I would sit there, and we would get into debate. And then he would turn around, we would get into debates, and then he says, now, Prophet Jordan, get up and prophesy. and that was Bishop. And he created more controversy. He was probably the most controversial mentor when it came down to creating tension around scripture and the text. And then there was Bishop Roy Brown, which kind of taught me how to be a churchman. And he was very interesting. But it was Bishop McKinley that brought me to Bishop Roy Brown. He made Bishop Roy Brown embrace me because I prophesied. And Bishop McKinley, I went to Bishop Roy Brown years ago to prophesy to him. And Bishop Brown looked at me and says, son, you're off. You're confused. And kept moving. I went on the outside of his church. And then years later, Bishop McKinley said to Bishop Roy Brown, says, I'm bringing in Prophet Jordan. And Bishop Brown said, I believe he's off. I don't want him in my church prophesying. He says, if you don't have Bishop Jordan, I'm not coming, and Jackie won't be able to come here no more and preach. So that's what Bishop McKinley made the Black Pentecostal Church accept me, because he would tell them, they would say, I'm bringing in the young prophet, Bishop Jordan, or Prophet Jordan, to come in and prophesy. They says, we don't have prophecy. He had me prophesying in PAW churches, Bible Way churches. He had me in all those churches as a team. And he says, we don't do prophecy. We don't believe in that stuff. He says, if you don't have Prophet Jordan, I'm not coming, and Jackie will not be coming either. So they had to receive all three of us. So that's how we ended up on the national scene. And then Bishop McKinley said these words to me on the plane. He said to me, he says, Prophet Jordan, I will open the doors for you. It's up to you to keep them open. That's what Bishop. So Bishop McKinley was he was a person that allowed me. I mean, I was in his home. I watched the way he also loved books. He had an extensive library, but all theological. He didn't read any current things. He had all age stuff, like Puritan type of stuff.